Hello fellow teachers, this is teacher Nora. In this video, I am going to show you my study notebook in LDM2 Module 3A. Let's get started. My study notebook, LDM2 course for teachers, Module 3A, Designing Instruction in the Different Learning Delivery Modalities. Lesson 1 is Understanding the Different LDMs. Activity 1. Do a quick check of your knowledge of the four modalities prescribed in the LCP: face-to-face learning, distance learning, blended learning, and homeschooling. In your own words, define each modality. Write your own definitions in your study notebook. When you are done, check Lesson 1, Activity 1, Answer Key 1 to see how well you did. Now answer this question. Which of the LDMs do not have the face-to-face learning component? Write down your answer in your study notebook, then check it against Lesson 1, Activity 1, Answer Key 2. So my own definition, face-to-face learning, it is the traditional way of instruction wherein the teacher and the learners are facing each other and interacting with each other. Distance learning is a delivery of instruction wherein the teacher and the learners do not have the direct contact or far away from each other. Learners engage in independent learning at home or in any physical learning space applicable by using learning materials that are accessible either online, stored in USBs or CDs, printed materials, by viewing TV lessons or listening to radio-based instruction, or by being geographically distant from the teacher. Blended learning is a combination of different learning modalities. Homeschooling, the learning takes place inside the learner's home, wherein there is a tutor hired or the parents direct and facilitates the learning of their child. For Activity 1, which of the LDMs do not have the face-to-face learning component? Answer: distance learning and homeschooling are the learning modalities which do not require face-to-face learning component. Activity 2. Read two documents, Guidance on Distance Learning and Non-Negotiable Minimum Requirements for Distance Learning. As you go through the readings, complete the distance learning matrix. Share your completed matrix at your next Slack session. Your goal is to come to a shared understanding with your peers on the different DL modalities and their defining features and requirements. So this is my learning modality matrix. For the Activity 3, the LCP assures that all possible measures will be taken to ensure that no child will be excluded from learning during the COVID-19 crisis. Think about groups of learners in your school division who might require special consideration to be able to participate in the distance learning. Describe what targeted interventions you would develop to include them. Listed below are some examples which may be relevant to your context. Add others as appropriate. Write down your answers in your study notebook and share your ideas at your next Slack session. These are the targeted interventions for specific groups of learners. Good job! You are now done with Lesson 1. Let's proceed to Lesson 2 to learn how to design lessons and assessment in the different learning delivery modalities. Lesson 2, Designing Lessons and Assessments in the different learning delivery modalities. Activity 1. Read DepEd Order number 42, Series 2016 on Policy Guidelines on Daily Lesson Preparations. As you go through the document, write down your answers to the following questions in your study notebook. Number 1. What is lesson designing or lesson planning? Answer: lesson designing is the process of preparing lesson for instruction. During the preparation, the following considerations takes place. A. Lesson objectives. B. Materials or resources. C. Learning tasks or learning activities. The learning tasks or activities are properly sequenced to help learners meet the objectives. Number 2, why is lesson designing important? Lesson designing is important because it helps teacher maintain standards for teaching. It also maximizes time for teaching and learning. Because of it, there is a smooth flow and orderly sequence lessons. Number 3, what are the 3 elements or components of a well-designed lesson? The 3 components of a well-designed lesson are: number 1, what should be taught? This clearly articulated lesson or objectives. Number 2, how should it be taught? Well-selected and logically sequenced presentation of learning resources and activities to help learners meet the objectives. Number 3, how it should be assessed. Appropriately and timely assessment activities that provide relevant information and feedback for both teachers and learners. Activity 2. The second component of a well-designed lesson asks teachers to select and sequence teaching and learning activities that would help learners meet the learning objectives. These learning tasks can be presented before the lesson, during the lesson, and after the lesson. So these are the activities before the lesson proper, and after the lesson. Before the lesson are the review previous lesson, clarify concepts from previous lesson, state lesson objectives as guide for learners, present warm-up activities to establish interest in new lesson, check learners' prior knowledge about the new lesson, present connection between old and new lesson, and establish purpose for new lesson. During the lesson proper, the activities are: provide learners with feedback, explain, model, demonstrate, and illustrate the concepts, ideas, skills, or processes that students will eventually internalize, help learners understand and master new information, check for learners' understanding, and after the lesson, wrap up activities, emphasize key information and concepts discussed, ask learners to recall key activities and concepts discussed, reinforce what teacher has taught, assess whether lesson has been mastered, transfer ideas and concepts to new situations. For the activity 3, lesson design does not end after implementing the lesson. After the delivery of the lesson, teachers should take time to reflect on what worked well and why, and what could have been done differently. Identifying successful and less successful activities and strategies would make it easier to adjust and revise the lesson plan as needed. In your study notebook, copy the components of the daily lesson log or DLL or the detailed lesson plan or DLP listed below. Then, highlight which part or parts is or are accomplished after the lesson is delivered. These are the components of the DLL or DLP. 1. Objectives. 2. Content. 3. Learning materials and resources. 4. Procedures. 5. Remarks. And 6. Reflection. According to Depth Order number 42, Series 2016, the reflection part of the DLL and DLP should be filled up after the lesson is delivered. Teachers are encouraged to think about their lessons, particularly the parts that went well and the parts that were weak, and write about those briefly. In the reflection, teachers can share their thoughts and feelings about their lessons, including things about the lesson that were successfully implemented and which ones need improvement or could be adjusted in the future. Teachers can also take note of the number of learners who earned 80% in the evaluation, the number of learners who required additional activities for remediation, and the difficulties teachers encountered that their principal or supervisor can help solve. Activity 4. Read the handout designing lessons in the delivery of learning. In your study notebook, recreate and accomplish the following table. Then choose one lesson from a self-learning module for students that you have on hand. Imagine that you will deliver this lesson to your learners through distance learning. In the second column, identify which of these tasks are already present in the SLM. In the third column, identify which has to be presented via technology-mediated resources, supplementary learning materials, or other means. So this is my output. Number 1, for learning tasks not found in the SLM, you examine what materials or resources can you create or curate to supplement the SLM. Answer, I can create or curate lesson videos, activity sheets, or worksheets to supplement the SLM. Number 2, what kind of additional support can you give to the learner, to the household partner so that they are guided throughout the lesson? Answer, I can give support by giving constant communication through texting, chatting, or calling. Number 3, how can the teacher gather feedback on the different learning tasks in order to define or modify current and future lessons? The teacher can gather feedback on the different learning tasks by asking questions, giving the individual learning monitoring plan, or making a suggestion box. Activity 5. Assessment is always a part of designing the instruction. Read the Depth Order 8, Series 2015 on Policy Guidelines on Classroom Assessment to learn about assessment. In the policy, you will find out about the two types of assessment, the formative and summative. Take note of the similarities and differences between the two. Write your answers in a Venn diagram in your study notebook. Follow the example below. So these are the differences and similarities of the summative and the formative assessment. For the formative assessment, assessment to make adjustments, short item tests, can be done in any part of the lesson, measures if the learning objectives are met, not graded, and flexible and informal. For the similarities, both are measures learning individually or collaboratively, can be paper, pencil, or performance tasks. For the summative assessment, assessment to make decisions, long tests done after a unit of study, measures if the content and performance standards are met, summative assessment is graded, and formal. Activity 6. These are various methods of assessment. There are various methods of assessment. Read Table 2 of Depth Order 8, Series 2015 on Policy Guidelines on Classroom Assessment to see examples such as games, quizzes, and interviews. These methods that are commonly used in the classroom may be modified to be suitable for distance learning. Which assessment methods can you adopt in distance learning considering the content area that you are teaching? In your study notebook, recreate the following table and these 5 methods that you would like to try. For each one, write how you plan to use it in distance learning. Assessment method and how to adapt the assessment method in distance learning. Open-ended question. I will send a question via messenger chat before the lesson. Based on the responses, I will take note of the common misconceptions and clarify them to the learners. For performance outputs, I will provide activities or performances. Then ask the parent learning facilitator to take a recording or video with the learners while the learners are performing them. Then I will ask to send a video to my email or to Messenger. Portfolio. I will orient the parents, learning facilitators about the portfolio. Then monitor every Saturday how the learner's portfolio preparation is going. Activity sheets or worksheets. I will distribute the activity sheets or worksheets together with the self-learning modules. For the written works, I will distribute the hard copies of written works together with the SLMs. Number 1, what assessment methods are common among the group members? Answer: the assessment methods common to the group are activity sheets or worksheets, written works, and performance outputs. Number 2, what are the challenges in doing assessment in distance learning? Answer: the challenges in doing assessment in distance learning are: first, the authenticity of the assessment, because the teachers does not know if the learners answer this assessment or not. And it is difficult to assess the learners for the performance task. It is difficult to know if the children perform the task or not because the teachers can't see personally. 3. Despite the challenges, what opportunities can you and your colleagues explore to make assessment doable in distance learning? Answer: we can use technology and communicate with the parents. For example, we can ask them to take a video while the learners is performing the task and send the video to us. We also realize to orient the parents or learning facilitators carefully and encourage them to let the children answer the assessments or tasks. Activity 7. Sample learning outputs obtained from different assessment methods may be collected to build a learner's portfolio. Read guidelines on the preparation of portfolio and e-portfolio to find out how to construct and use it. After reading the references, answer the following quiz to check your understanding about using a portfolio to assess the learner. Question number 1. A portfolio mainly displays the academic achievements of the learner. This is false. 2. Testimonies of guardians and parents and learning facilitators regarding the learner's progress may be included in a portfolio. True. 3. There is a fixed list of items that should be included in a portfolio. False. Number 4. The teacher can only comment on a learner's portfolio. False. 5. For asynchronous learning, teachers allow learners to work on their outputs during their own time. The latter will submit the portfolio within the schedule that the teacher set. True. Number 6. The learners may submit, store, and manage their portfolio via file sharing programs, or they can submit the actual copies of their work saved on a CD, DVD, USB, flash drive. True. Number 7. Portfolios of distance learners learners with outputs in hard copies or physical forms may be handed over to the teacher by the parents or learning facilitators. True. Good job! You are now done with Lesson 2. Proceed to Lesson 3 to learn how to guide and monitor learners in the different learning delivery modalities. Lesson 2, Guiding and Monitoring Learners in the Different LDMs. Activity 1. Answer the simple check-up quiz below. Read and match the descriptions in column A with the terms in column B. Write your answers in your study notebook. Column A. These are the knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that learners need to demonstrate in every lesson and/or learning task. The answer is C. Learning competencies. Number 2, these are the formative learning opportunities given to learners to engage them in the subject matter and to enhance their understanding of the content. The answer is D. Learning task. Number 3, this refers to the prescribed subject that learners take. The answer is A. Learning area. Number 4, this refers to the method of submission of learning outputs preferred by the learner or parent based on their context. The answer is B. Mode of delivery. For the activity 2, read items 1 to 6 of the Appendix D of the DepEd Memorandum DMCI 2020-00162, which discusses what weekly home learning plans and individual learning monitoring plans are. After that, view the 3 sample weekly home learning plans. Now, based on what you have read, create or work a weekly home learning plan for your class. This is the sample of my weekly home learning plan. For the activity 3, read items 7 to 11 of the Appendix D of DepEd Memorandum DMCI to 2020-00162. After you read the guidelines on creating Individual Learning Monitoring Plan or ILMP, copy and fill out the table below in your study notebook to see how the ILMP differs from the WHLP. So these are the differences: weekly home learning plan and the individual learning monitoring plan or ILMP. The purpose: the WHLP serve as guide for learners and learning facilitators. It helps learners take responsibility of their own learning. While the individual learning monitoring plan, the purpose is to monitor learning progress, to know what assistance can be provided to the learner who lag behind, and to provide mechanisms to support learners. For whom, the WHLP are for all the learners, and the learning facilitator, the individual learning monitoring plan for the learners who lag behind. And the components, the WHLP the components are learning area, learning tasks, learning competencies, and mode of delivery. Has to be communicated to parents? Yes. For the activity 4, assume that after going through the output submitted by your learners, one of them has problems completing the learning task for the first 2 weeks. Think of a possible difficulty the learner may encounter in accomplishing the learning task. Apply what you have learned about ILMPs in Activity 3 and create an ILMP for that particular learner who lags behind. Read and use the Individual Learning Monitoring Plan template. Consider the components of the ILMP that were described in Activity 3. So this is the example of my ILMP. The learner's name is Prince Ragas, grade level 3. The learning area with difficulty, mathematics, English, Araling Panlipunan, and mother tongue. Learner's need, difficulty in finishing the learning task, difficulty in reading the learning materials, difficulty in finishing the learning task in Araling Panlipunan, difficulty in comprehending the materials. The intervention strategies provided are extending time of completion of tasks, asking the learner facilitators for guidance, give additional reading and supplementary materials, extending time of completion of tasks, adjusting the level of difficulty of the learning contents or tasks, provide activity sheets appropriate to his level. Before leaving this module, take note of the following key messages. There are no perfect lessons, but with careful planning, reflection, and continuous adaptation before, during, and after the lesson delivery, you will be able to design lessons with your best efforts and maximize learning in this new context. It is important for teachers to keep track of how the students are doing. Get feedback from the learners self-assessment, and from the learning facilitators or household partners in order to continuously improve lessons and provide support for learners as they learn. One way of getting feedback from learners is by communicating regularly with them and their families. As teachers, you need to make your presence felt and send the message to the learners that they are not alone in this situation. This will greatly help them stay motivated. As teachers, you are part of a larger community of learners and would need support from your coaches, school heads, and fellow teachers as you adapt to the new normal. Congratulations! You have completed Module 3A. You are now ready for Module 3B, which is the learning resources. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.